Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Authors and Agents with Rose Quinn. I have the wonderful Heather Bell Adams on the podcast with me today. She is the author of the Good Stone and tells us all about her book, her publishing journey, and shares some really interesting facts about herself and gives some really good tips to aspiring authors out there. And I think you guys are really going to love getting to know Heather. Heather, can you tell us about your novel, The Good Stone?
Yes, and first of all, thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
Just so excited to be talking with you today. So The Good Stone is out now from Haywire Books. It came out in early July. It's been a challenging year for a lot of people, including the publishing industry, so I was just grateful for it to come out when we had scheduled it. The Good Stone is about a matriarch of Savannah society, a 90-year-old woman named Audrey Thorpe, who suddenly disappears when a secret she has kept since World War II begins to unravel. Wow. And so it's a dual timeline story between roughly present day, it's 2010, Savannah, Georgia, and 1941-42 in the Philippines, where Audrey had served as a nurse.
Wow, that is very cool, and I love dual timelines in books. Have you ever been to the Philippines?
I have not. I would love to go sometime. I did a lot of research for the book, obviously, since I wasn't alive in World War II. I've never been a nurse, and I've never been to the Philippines. Yeah. So at least I had been to Savannah. So
well, that's that part down. Awesome. Yeah, definitely some research involved in that, I'm sure. Well, that sounds lovely, and yes, it has definitely been a strange year for books to come out and to be, trying to get anything happening in the publishing industry. So tell me, how your journey went to, the creation of your book, to getting it out into the world. Kind of how did that happen for you?
Sure. So The Good Stone is my second novel. My first novel, Maranatha Road, was published by University Press, West Virginia University Press, in 2017. And so then I embarked on a new project, and I signed with Carly Waters as a literary agent. And we, submitted widely and ended up at Haywire Books, which is a small press in Richmond, and I just could not be happier with, my experience with them. That's been kind of the process for me. I like I like to always be working on a project. So, even when I was doing events for Maranatha Road, that's when I was starting research on the Good Stone, or, trying to think about what's the next story idea, what's going to be the next novel that I want to work on.
Yeah. Isn't Carly just the best in the world? I've interviewed her and, sort of become friends, and I think she's just wonderful.
She really is such an impressive person, and I just adore working with her.
Yeah, she's so great. Well, that's awesome. Well, tell me how, the lovely experience of querying went for you, and then any tips you might have for writers who are in the querying process right now.
Sure. Querying ended up being, a better process for me than I had thought. You hear so many stories of it can take a really long time. I kind of lucked out, I think, in that both with Carly and with Marley Russoff, the agent I had earlier, I did sign with them relatively quickly after beginning the process. Mm-hmm. And I think what I would perhaps attribute that to, certainly just happenstance and good luck.
Right.
But also, I tried to, and this, I guess, would be my advice to writers who are in the querying trenches, is to really, really target agents who I thought represented similar works to mine. And there's always this feeling of inferiority and, I'm not as good as those people, right? And that's always there for me. But at least I could recognize, okay, this agent is working with such and such an author, and I can identify specific similarities between my work and that author's work. And then, of course, mention that in the query. I'm querying you because you represent so-and-so, and I feel that my work might appeal to the same sort of reader or something like that.
Right.
I think that's so, because agents, obviously, it's such a subjective business anyway. And then agents have different, of course, personal preferences when they're reading manuscripts, and they have their particular editorial contacts at publishers that, might specialize in certain types of books, even if we're just talking about, say, historical fiction. Even within that, their contacts might lean more toward a really, heavy, thick, complex Victorian novel versus something that's kind of light and book clubbish and set in the 50s. It's just, I think the more you can tailor the approach, the better.
Definitely. I think that is such good advice. And, it leads into do your research and spend the time kind of really searching out the right agents for you that you think will be the best fit, instead of just dumping a bunch of agents' emails into a query email and sending them out, We want the process to go by very quickly, but it does help to do some research when you're starting out.
Right, exactly.
Well, tell me a little bit about your least favorite part and your favorite part of the publishing journey that you've been on so far.
That's such a great question. I would say my favorite part is meeting with book clubs who have read my book. Obviously, that looks a little different these days than it did with the first book.
Right.
But I just love getting together with other readers and, of course, talking about my book, but then also answering their questions and so on. And they ask such insightful, great questions. But then also, of course, it's a group of readers, right? And so it's just so much fun to spend time with other readers and exchange thoughts about books we've read recently or things like that. I really enjoy that a lot. Obviously, this year, it's by Zoom or Skype or something. It's not quite the same, but I'm so thankful to be able to do it and to have a little more flexibility geographically. That's, I guess, the bright side, right?
Yeah.
I would say my least favorite part is probably, everybody probably says this, it's just probably all the waiting. Every stage of publishing probably takes longer than you think it would, and it's with good reason. I mean, I understand, agents and editors and everybody in the process has just a massive inbox to get through and that sort of thing. And obviously we're talking about novel length manuscripts, which take time to get through. But, my solution to that, I guess, is to move on, as I mentioned earlier a bit, and just focus on the next project, get going on something else that's exciting. And then when you do hear back on something, then it's sort of a nice surprise and that's right, I was waiting on that, rather than just constantly stressed about it and refreshing the inbox.
I think distraction can be such a great tool to use for sure when you're dealing with any part of the publishing journey, whether you're querying, distract yourself by working on something else, or, on sub or all those things. Yeah, make sure you're busy and not just staring at your email, because that makes it so much worse.
Yes, exactly.
Well, Heather, tell me a little bit about your writing style. So when you're writing, you're drafting, are you more of a pantser, a planner, or do you fall somewhere in between?
I would say mostly a pantser. I have really wanted to be a planner, a plotter. I've tried so many times to have an outline. And for whatever reason, and I don't know, I'm a lawyer by day, and that obviously requires a lot of planning, organization, and so on. And maybe it's just that my brain uses up all of that on the legal job, because when I try to do that for writing, I'll tell you what it does. It sort of kills the story for me. I sort of feel like, oh, well, I'm done with that story now. It's so strange. It just kind of takes the magic out of it for me.
Yes.
But I know it works really well for a lot of people. And I do still wish I could do it. But anyway, so I just kind of tend to go about it organically. I start with character almost always, and just kind of keep asking, well, what if this happened? Or what if this happened? And just, I end up wasting a lot of words that way, because sometimes I'll write in a direction that ends up not being the direction I need to go in, and I have to backtrack and start over. But yeah, and so I guess when I say I'm a little bit in between, mostly a pantser, but then for the Good Lifestone, because of the dual timeline approach and just the way the story's structured, I did map out a little bit on index cards. Once I knew the kind of big plot points, I try to make sure they were in the right place, if that makes sense. So that,
Definitely.
Something exciting is happening in the past storyline, and then we have something exciting in the present storyline, just kind of keep track of it that way.
I am with you. I feel like the magic is completely gone when I plan something out too heavily. I feel like I don't have to write it anymore because I already did, obviously, right? I wrote it all out. I planned it all out. So yeah, I definitely lean more towards a pantsing side as well. I think, I focus more on murder mysteries. So I do have to have I do know some plot points and big things I want to happen throughout the way, but I allow myself the freedom to figure it out as I go, which allows me to not be so I hate planning and sticking to a schedule, basically, is what it feels like.
Right.
but what I love about this question is that everybody does it differently. We all have such a different method for getting things done. Recently I've started using one of those Alpha Smart Neo typewriter type things, where you can only see 4 lines of text, and for me it has been amazing because I have 3 kids and so much distraction always that sitting at my computer I'm okay, I need to check my emails, I need to do the podcast, I need to work, I need to do this. But when I sit with that, I'm focused. And I had a friend who tweeted something and she's those things terrify me. I could never write on those. I need the biggest screen possible and to have all of it in front of me. And I love that we're all so different, and it's just helpful for some people who might not maybe know what works best for them to hear other people's strategies and tactics.
Yeah. I think it's always fun and just sort of inspiring in a way to hear writers talk about just how they get it done, what works for you, because what works for one person might not work for the other, but maybe some little piece of it would be of interest. It's fascinating, and I'm glad to hear that you and I are similar in that way, because I sometimes feel less than, because there are so many people who have these detailed spreadsheets and the whole thing plotted out. Wow, that's so impressive.
It's so impressive.
And I sort of feel a little weird that it just doesn't work for me. So I'm glad to hear we're in the same boat on that. And I have not heard of the did you say it was a typewriter?
Well, I mean, that's what I call it. It's they call it a word processor. I posted a picture of it on my Instagram, but it basically is just a keyboard with a little screen that shows 4 lines of text at a time. And I think they used to use them in schools, to help people learn how to write. But it is magic for me lately.
That is so interesting. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's very cool. But I mean, it might not work for you too. But I'm glad to feel I'm not alone too, because I see people who outline so great and then the words come to them. And I feel I would have a lot less revision time if I could do that. If I could really outline so good. Yeah. But I just don't think I would actually write the story.
Right.
What do you do? It's all right. We're all different. Well, my next thing, Heather, that I would love for you to share is something your readers wouldn't necessarily know about you.
Let's see. Maybe that I am not a very good cook.
Oh.
I think that a lot of writers, again, when you see on social media, a lot of my writing friends, of course, post about their writing, but they also post these elaborately just beautiful meals, and I'm just astounded. I mean, I cook food to get meals on the table, you know, but I just am not a very good cook, and I don't enjoy it. I've just not gotten that. So that would be my confession, is I'm just really not a very good cook.
Do you have a good cook in your household?
My husband is good at grilling.
There you go.
Grilling meat. So that's good. That's helpful.
I mean, you can't go wrong with meat. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I do love to cook. For me, it's just kind of, like one of those relaxing things, weirdly enough. But, it's like I can be in the kitchen and be like, okay, kids, go leave me alone. Like, I'm cooking dinner. Go do something else. But, the one thing I wish I was better at was baking. And I do wish I was even better at cooking. Like, some people cook such amazing things, like, without following recipes and just know how to, like, make sauces and stuff. And I'm pretty, a typical, like, beginner level cook.
Right. Right.
But it's all right. There's so many easy things. You can order in food now. You don't even need to learn how to cook.
Well, and I'm glad that I don't necessarily like cold weather, but I'm glad that we're in the season for soup.
Yes.
Because I can throw stuff in a pot and, make soup. So.
Oh, yeah. Soup is always good. And like crock pot too. I'm like a lover of the crock pot, where I can throw things in there and not have to do much preparation, and then 8 hours later, boom, perfect meal.
Done. Yep, exactly.
Very good. Well, thank you for sharing that. My next question is, how much time do you spend writing every day? On a typical day, which is not like a word we should even use anymore.
So as I mentioned, I'm a lawyer. So I have that full-time job that takes up the majority of my day.
Yeah.
And then I have a 17-year-old son. So I don't necessarily write every day. I would like to, but sometimes it just does not happen.
Right.
Even on the days when I'm not writing, though, I am thinking about the story when I'm walking the dog or, running an errand. So I would say, I get a lot of writing done on nights and weekends. My husband and son both golf a lot.
Ooh.
And so that is a time-consuming hobby for them.
Yes.
And that leaves me, at home by myself, and it's good writing time. So, yeah, I just try to fit it in. And I have said this, I don't think I've mentioned it today yet, but for both Maranatha Road and the Good Lifestone, I wrote parts of those books just in the margins of life, like waiting for my takeout lunch or waiting for a flight at the airport. I always have a little, it's nothing fancy, a little notebook, and just jot down notes or, draft little bits of a scene or something. So that sort of slow and steady progress, I guess, is kind of what I'm after.
I think that is great. I mean, there are times of like just depending on what you have going on in your life, like as a parent, you can't always dedicate, like typical work hours to writing, right? And especially with a day job, you've got to find those times when it just comes to you. Like, I love to type on my phone and my notepad different things that come to me, and I have a 9-month-old baby who is usually in one of my arms, so I only have one free hand, and that's perfect to like just write in there as much as I can throughout the day. So I think you just got to find what works for you and fit it in, but as long as you're dedicated to it, you'll make that work, right? And find those times.
Yes, I think that's exactly true. And I think also it helps when we give ourselves grace about it and don't, beat ourselves up if, say, a day goes by or 2 days go by when we're not able to write because life has gotten in the way. It'll be there waiting for us when we're able to get back to it. It's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. Your characters aren't going to up and leave you and go find somebody else that's going to write them.
Thank goodness, right?
That would be really sad if they were, because mine would have been gone long ago. My next question is about, writing and the stress of it at times, right? Like, writing kind of I mean, writing is something that you're taking stuff out of you and putting it on a page, and it can be emotionally draining. It can be stressful, whether you're on deadline, whether, like you have a full-time job, you have all these other things to juggle, and yet, you have to write and revise and do all this stuff. So what tips do you have, or what kind of experiences have you had with making sure that you're taking care of yourself as a human, but also finding ways to help you, write even when it's difficult?
I think it's helpful to step back and try to remember what was the original spark of inspiration for whatever project you're working on.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can get lost in the weeds and lose sight of that, and it always helps me to remember that. And so even if it has changed, even if the idea has morphed and changed throughout the creation, going back to that original, what made me excited to write this in the beginning? What made me first set pen to paper on this particular project is always invigorating. And the other thing I would say is when we're having trouble writing, whether it's writer's block or just for some reason it's stressing us out, or it's difficult, or we've kind of lost that joy, I often will go back to a favorite book of mine, as a reader, and just kind of dip back into that. And it sounds cheesy to say that inspires me, but it really does, because my personal desire to write comes from my love of reading. So when I'm able to connect back with that usually helps.
I think that is, tried and true for me as well. There are times when, if I've got writer's block, or I just, sometimes I have too many emotions inside to be able to think and write, and going and escaping into a familiar story, or even just a brand new story, reading anything really helps me to break that up and to kind of refill things so that I can get back to what I need to be doing.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I asked that question just because the world is so crazy right now, right? I didn't write for about 6 months of this year. I don't blame, because he's the most perfect person in the world, but I had a baby this year. And so real difficult to try and write with a newborn, but also everything going on in the world. I just, so much. So it's good to, share tips and tricks to still function with the craziness going on around us.
Yes, exactly. And I so admire that you're able to get anything done with a newborn. I mean, that's impressive. The lack of sleep alone is, an obstacle.
Yes.
And I do think a lot of my writer friends and I have talked about this year in particular, it feeling awkward to write, or, we feel that, this is just such a sort of superficial thing that I'm doing, and there's just so much heaviness in the world right now. There's so much of importance, that's just so much more important than my writing project going on. And I do think it helps to have other writing friends, or to listen to your podcast, or just things like that just sort of encourage us that people will always need story and want story, and look to story for an escape from perhaps the day-to-day heaviness in the world. But then also, for those of us who have felt scatterbrained, or just unable to focus, or depressed, or whatever it might be for this past year, that's understandable. It's just kind of the reality of the world right now.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, give yourself some grace, be patient with yourself throughout all of this. And, I think, for me, writing has always become and been a very therapeutic thing. So once I got through, the craziness of this year and newborn life, I was like, okay, I'm missing something, and it was writing. So, sometimes you do need to just maybe give yourself a little space from it to remember, what it's all about and why you love it.
I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Well, Heather, I have just one last question for you. It is a hard question, so I do apologize. I'd love to know what your favorite book is right now. And this is just a book you've read recently that you really enjoyed.
That is such a hard question, isn't it? But I have been thinking about it because at the end of every year, I give some friends of mine a copy of my favorite book that I've read in the past year. So it's been on my mind because I've been, starting to buy those gifts. So obviously it is not the end of the year yet, so something may supplant it. But so far, my favorite book that I've read this year is called The Boy in the Field by Margot Livesey. I just really fell in love with this story. It's about 3 siblings who are, I guess 2 of them are teenagers and the third is a little bit younger, and they come across this boy in a field who has been attacked, but it goes from there and follows each of their lives in terms of how did that incident shape them or change them. And we get to meet, of course, their parents and kind of the larger family. And I love it because it's definitely literary fiction. It's not going to be for people who want a really fast-paced thriller or something like that. But what I love about it is the characters just seem so genuine and so real. So I really enjoyed it.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I love your tradition of gifting people your favorite book of the year. I think that might be something I have to do. I love to give books as presents, and I always try to find, I have very different readers in my family, so I always try and pick something for each of them. But yeah, that makes me think, what would I give as a gift? That's a good thing to think about. A hard one. My goodness.
Yeah. Well, I like you, love giving books as gifts, and I have a lot of family members who, I try to tailor. My dad, for example, loves mysteries and police procedurals, and so that's what I get him. But this small group of women friends who are writers, we do happen to share the same tastes, generally speaking. And so, I just started it last year. Last year it was The Dearly Beloved by Kara Wall. So it's fun.
Heather, thank you so much for chatting with me and telling us all about your book, The Good Stone. I'm excited to see what happens next in your writing career.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Authors and Agents with Rose Quinn. I hope that you rate and review this podcast wherever you have found it, and if not, tag me in something at Rose Quinny, Quinny. I would love to connect with you. See you next time.